pretty much the biggest thing that I can recommend to you is just focus on bike handling skills. Because if you don't know how to handle your bike at a stop, whether it's a short bike or a tall bike, you're going to drop it. If you're not paying attention to where you're stopping or what terrain is around you, when you do have to put your foot down, you're going to drop any bike because you're going to roll your ankle, you're going to do something stupid, your bike's going to slip out from under you. What is going on, guys? How are you guys doing? As you guys can tell, I am not on my XC250. I am on my brother's Suzuki DR7. I don't. It's a Japanese. It's technically called the Suzuki 250 SB. It's essentially a Kawasaki KLX 250, but made by Suzuki. But anyways, that's kind of beside the point. I'm not in gear for one. I only have these kitchen mitts. But anyways, what I'm doing right now is I'm just riding, man. I'm riding to the motorcycle shop because I got to go pick up a flywheel puller for the XC250 motor. But I decided I'd bring you guys along because one, we don't get to ride this bike very often with each other. But yeah, so today's motovlog is going to be about riding different bikes and short people riding tall bikes. Okay, so this bike is pretty tall in comparison to the XC250. I can extend both of my feet and I am nowhere close to touching the ground. This bike probably has a 35 inch seat height. It's tall. I'm a small guy, as you guys know. I stand a mere 5 feet 4 inches tall off of the ground. So this bike is incredibly tall for me. However, since I've been riding for almost 3 years now, you understand what you can and can't do when it comes to motorcycles. And you also understand how things work when it comes to stops and how you orient your body on the bike. Let me turn the fan on. Totally forgot to do that. How you orient your body on the bike at stoplights and turns and this, that, and the other thing. And really, there's not really much to it except for being confident and knowing what situations are going to get you in trouble. So, for example, a situation that's going to get me in trouble as a small rider are going to be like off-camber situations. When the ground underneath my feet is not level, or I am having to tilt the bike on a side that does not favor my short leg syndrome. So for example, if the bike is slanting this way and I have to put my leg down on the right side of the bike, I am most likely going to drop the bike. So it would be smarter for me to put my foot down on the opposite side, on the side that actually has the more steep angle, so the higher up portion of the street or whatever I'm trying to ride or stand on. But in terms of everything else, if you're just riding on the street, being a short rider is not a big deal if you're doing it on a tall bike. The situations that you have to watch out for are situations where A, you're either surprised, or B, you well, yeah, it's going to be a surprise because honestly, the points where you're surprised are the points where you're not thinking. So really, as a short rider on a tall bike, you have to be thinking all of the time. You have to be thinking, okay, what situation is going to be safest for me? How am I going to park this thing? And where am I going to potentially get myself into trouble? So if you're riding on the pavement, it's not really a big deal. The only things they have to watch out for are, say, sloped areas or potholes whenever you come to a stop. But if you're riding, it's no big deal. It's just like riding a small bike. Except for it's more comfortable because if you have short legs, you have more leg room. So when it comes to stopping, that's the only thing you have to worry about. So if you are doing it as a as a bike that you're going to be on the highway a lot with, it's no big deal. You're just riding like normal. You're riding. This bike could be a freaking Honda Grom, but it definitely doesn't. You won't feel the difference except for the leg space. But if you're riding off-road on a taller bike, that is a completely different set of worms, because there's not going to be a situation where everything is perfectly flat. When you're off-roading, you're having to deal with off-camber situations incredibly frequently, and also the surface that you're standing on when you do come to a stop is almost going to be guaranteed to be a sloped situation or something that's not perfectly flat. So you will have to think about where you're going to stop, and you're going to have to be more conscious of that stop when you get there. So you have to be like, okay, I'm going to ride 10 or 15 feet further so I can find an appropriate spot to stop. Versus, say, riding a short bike off-road, you can just waddle through everything, through obstacles. Versus on a tall bike, you have to pick your lines and your stopping points very carefully in case you do happen to have to put your foot down. But one of the metrics that I'm going to go ahead and switch over to riding different bikes. So it's important as a short rider to ride different bikes, because seat height is just a metric. It's one number. It's like, imagine me trying to tell you how a bike feels just by telling you the horsepower. It's like you can get a rough idea that, oh, hey, it's pretty quick, or it's going to be fast or whatever, but it doesn't give you a complete idea of how the bike is going to feel. Horsepower is just one metric. What you need to know is you need to know torque, you need to know power band, you need to know how many gears it has, you need to know, you need to know a bunch of different things. But back to seat height. Giving you, say, hey, let's say the bike is 34 inches in terms of seat height, it's only one metric. And it doesn't tell you how the bike is going to feel when you're riding it. So, for example, this bike is 34 inches, 35 inches. It's a tall bike. Yeah, like I know instantly in my mind, hey, I'm going to have to be conscious of that if I do ride this bike often, because I only have a 29-inch inseam. So it might be a challenge. However, now that I hop on this bike and I've ridden this bike before, I know that it's thin. I know that it's a really thin bike. It's almost like riding a bicycle in terms of how thin the seat is. And that means a whole lot when it comes to being a tall bike, because if a bike is tall and thin, it doesn't really eat up much of your inseam. Yes, it will be tall, but it's going to feel a lot more manageable than, say, a tall bike with a wide seat, because you're going to have to end up putting you're going to have to stick your leg out an extra, 2 or 3 inches to touch the ground, versus just sliding your butt over and then putting your foot down. But that's why it's kind of important that you ride different bikes. And it's also something that I've never heard of anybody really talking about when it comes to being a short rider and shopping for bikes is, hey, the seat thickness in terms of width in between your legs is a huge deal. Most bikes, you can get aftermarket seats. You can get aftermarket seats made for them, and you can get lowering links, or you can shave the seat, or you can get lower density foam. You can do a bunch of things to combat being a short rider. However, there's a limitation to how wide you can make your seat, or how skinny you can get it. You can't just cut a seat and be like, oh yeah, it's this will work. It would be like you trying to put a hat on that's too small for your head. It's just not going to work. This thing's a lot quicker than the XT. I'm jealous. But yeah, so that's kind of why it's important that you sit on bikes and you feel them, because as a short rider, there are certain things that a manufacturer can do to make that bike feel a little bit more manageable. And, seat height is just one metric, like I said, but seat thickness is not something that people talk about. Seat width, excuse me. Seat thickness, on the other hand, so the height of the foam, is another thing that people don't typically talk about. But it is very important for you if you do need to get your seat shaved, because if the bike that you're going to get doesn't have any foam on it to begin with, so for example the WR250, it's pretty much just a tiny thin layer of foam on top of your seat pan, and if you don't have any foam to shave, you're not going to be able to get that seat any lower, which is unfortunate. But if you're a beginner rider, or say you're going to buy a new bike, which is probably why you're watching this video, because I'm probably going to label it tips for buying bikes for short riders or something like that. If you are a new rider and you are short, buying a low bike, like a low dual sport like the XC250 or the TW200, or a low street bike like the Yamaha R3 or the Rebel 250 or the what's Honda's 250? I don't know. I can't forget it. The Kawasaki Ninja. They're all short bikes, and they allow you to feel a lot more comfortable than, say, a leader bike where you're gonna end up sitting 1 or 2 inches taller. And being able to touch the ground with both feet makes you feel a lot more comfortable, and it can save you in a lot of situations where, in other cases, if you didn't have that 1 or 2 inches, you would probably drop your bike. And really, it's something to take into consideration, but it's not everything. Being a short rider doesn't mean you're going to be restricted to short bikes. Like, for example, this bike is freaking tall. Like, when I'm standing next to this bike, it's probably right above it's almost at my rib cage, so my lower rib. So this thing is freaking tall, but I'm riding it, aren't I? So don't let being a short rider discourage you from buying a tall bike. However, a short bike is going to do you some favors in the long run in terms of comfort, because there's sometimes when I'm riding this bike that my calf kind of tightens up, because I am tippy-toeing this. Like, I have to put my thigh on the seat. I'm pretty much just left butt cheeking it, and my right foot goes on the ground. It's kind of a weird thing to have to talk to you about if you've never ridden a motorcycle, but ideally what you'd want to do is you'd want to sit in the very middle of it, just like a bicycle, drop both your legs down and be touching the floor. Like, that would be ideal. However, with me, I have to shift over to the side, and then I have to tiptoe in order to touch the ground. So it is mildly uncomfortable sometimes, but over time you get used to it. And, managing a bike, left foot, left side, or right side, is one of those things that you get better with time. So it's kind of hard for me as a somewhat experienced rider to tell somebody who's not so experienced that, it's easy to transition from left side to right side in terms of putting your foot down, but it's not. It's something that you have to learn, and it's easier, of course, to learn it on a short bike. But bike handling is kind of another tough thing to talk about, which is why you need to be riding different bikes and test riding or borrowing other people's bikes, because a skinny bike like this is great. A skinny bike typically means it's going to be lightweight. It's going to be easy for you to keep standing up while you transition from left side to right side. Say, for example, if you ever have to do that. But there are some bikes where it's not going to be easy for you to tiptoe it, and the bike is not going to want to stand upright because it's got a high center of gravity. So, for example, if you have a bike that has a lot of luggage on it, or if it has a top rack, or it has I don't know, a large safari tank. You're going to have more weight up top, and that's going to make it a little bit less easier for you to control while you're transitioning from left to right side or have the bike at a stop. What you have to do really is you just have to feel the bike. I know it's kind of a daunting thing to say if you're a new rider, but you have to do it. It's like trying on a pair of shoes at the store. You have to try them on. You can't just look at a shoe and say, oh, that looks kind of sporty. Nike's a good brand. Adidas is a good brand. Yamaha or Honda is a good brand. It'll work for me. No, totally not. It's not going to work if you don't try them out, because there are so many different sized bikes out there and they all feel differently. And you have to be able to figure out what style of riding you want to do and how much weight you're comfortable with shifting over left to the right, or having to tiptoe. This is going to be kind of a long video. I might break this up into 2 parts. But there's a lot of things to know that are more important than seat height. And it's tough for me as a short rider to talk to other short riders, because I've only bought one bike. I just happen to have 2 other bikes at my disposal to be able to test ride. And I can tell you from that experience alone, like, hey, it's worth sharing. You have to ride it to be able to know what it feels like. Oh, there you go. That's kind of the analogy that I forgot to tell you about, is the Yamaha R3. It's got a low seat height, about 30 inches, but it's wide. It's way wider than the XC250. So what might feel comfortable for me on the XC250, it's uncomfortable for me on the Yamaha R3. And just like I talked about weight and being top heavy, the Yamaha R3 it's pretty stout in comparison to the XT250. So when I need to toss it from side to side, it's not nearly as nimble as the XT is. And that's just something that you can't really figure out from a spec sheet or from a YouTube video. You have to be able to see it in person and feel it in person. But it's tough to... I keep saying that. It's so annoying. If you're a short rider, don't be afraid to try to hop on a bike in a showroom, but just know that when you're in a showroom and you're trying to buy a bike, you're excited. It's an overwhelming experience. You're looking at price tags, everything's shiny and new and nice and awesome, and you've got a fat stack of money in your pocket just burning a hole, and you want to buy something. But hey, just take it easy. Or vice versa. If you're just dreaming about bikes, don't write a bike off just because it's too tall or because you can't stand on it in the showroom. Just realize that, hey, a tall bike might be something that just takes a little bit longer for you to get used to, but you'll get used to it eventually. So don't let that discourage you. If it's an awesome bike and if it's well reviewed, it might be the bike for you, even if you're a short rider. And I don't know, kind of with that, I think I pretty much covered all my bases. Oh, I didn't talk about suspension. Of course, there are some suspension options that you have as a short rider that you can do. You can slide your forks through your triple tree or your triple clamps, and you can also get lowering links for your rear shock. You can get smaller tires if you want to, but we're getting into the realm of modifying the bike out of its actual design from the factory. And these bikes are designed by mechanics and engineers to run a certain way and to perform in a specific way given a certain, geometry. And when you start changing that geometry, you might change the bike's performance in a negative way. So I'm not really a huge proponent of lowering links or dropping your front suspension. But you can always get lighter weight suspension. You can always do a shave seat. That would be kind of what I recommend. You can get thicker boots. You can get lifts. But pretty much the biggest thing that I can recommend to you is just focus on bike handling skills. because if you don't know how to handle your bike at a stop, whether it's a short bike or a tall bike, you're going to drop it. If you're not paying attention to where you're stopping or what terrain is around you, when you do have to put your foot down, you're going to drop any bike because you're going to roll your ankle, you're going to do something stupid, your bike's going to slip out from under you. So the biggest thing is, if you're a short rider, focus on the foundations of bike handling. Focus on how to transition from left side to right side like I just did at a stop. And it's not a hard thing to do, but it does take practice, and it can be uncomfortable if you're just getting used to it and if it's something that you've never done before. Like, I've never ridden dirt bikes or anything like that, or actually had to, ride a bike or anything this tall and learn these mechanics. But now that I've learned them, it's like I can chew gum and walk at the same time. It doesn't really matter. I can go ahead and change it on the fly. So one of the things is that'll get you, I don't know if you can see it, is this pothole right down here. Do you see that? Right in front of those circles? That'll get you if you put your tippy toes right into that thing. You'll definitely drop your bike. But it's one of those things that you have to be looking out for as you're riding, and as a short rider. You always have to be conscious of it. Another thing is, I do my controls a certain way. So that also goes to bike handling, but I bias my right foot down because I need to be able to shift gears in a light, or be able to get myself out of neutral if I accidentally put myself there. So I pretty much always have my hand on the front brake. But what that means is, in a situation like I just did, where I have to take my hand off of the brake to open my visor or close my visor or whatever I need to do, the bike might slip. So it's just one of those things that you have to be conscientious. You have to think about, because it can get you into some trouble. So really, it's about knowing how you're riding and how to ride. But anyways, with that, guys, if you guys have any questions about being a short rider and looking at bikes, or how to handle a bike as a short rider, please feel free to let me know, because I wish somebody had told me exactly what I'm telling you, 3 or 4 years ago. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and until next time, peace out. Oh yeah, I forgot. If you liked the video, make sure you go ahead and drop me a like. If you think I missed any information about being a short rider and riding and buying bikes, or tips and tricks to ride a tall bike, feel free to leave those in the comments below. And also, if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can see more.